Hey, what's up, everybody? It's two over Yellow Auto Sports. I got Phil with me. Phil's the other guy here who tints. He's been tinting for a long time. We've probably got at least 1,000 cars under our belt each.
Easy.
At least. But basically, we both tinted the car in the GX470. You did your bottom load, right? That's the way that you like to tint.
Yep.
So, and I did a two-step. We both know how to do both. You learned with the two-step, right? That's what I taught you a long time ago. Then you went to the bottom load. Before we go into discussing, we're going to just go over watching how we both did it and kind of just critique each other. And the whole reason is basically just to show the window tinters, like, you can do it either way, really. Like, I've always been a big guy on just saying, like, however you got to tint your window, as long as it has no contaminants, that it's pretty much good to go. So let's just watch. Phil's did a bottom load, which requires removal of the door panel and stuff like that, the sweep. And then I did a two-step because sometimes I just don't like to remove those door handles as much, but you do get cleaner results, I find, when you bottom load.
For sure.
So let's just watch this, and then let's just go over what you did here. And then we were using Semtech in this one, too. So, like, what do you like about bottom loading versus two-stepping? Like, how you're... Is it just easier for you to feed the bottom?
Yeah, that's the biggest component to doing a bottom load is you don't have to worry about the bottom part of the film anymore. You don't have to roll it up. You can just slip it in. Everything is pretty much as is, and then you just do your squeegee passes, make sure everything's lined up. It's really simple. If you can get over the fear of taking off a door card, which it took me a long time to do as well, I think it honestly gets a better result. Then again, if you two-stage, if you're good at it, I'm not going to stop you. If you're good, you're good.
Yeah. So when you, so the biggest fear as tinter is always, getting contaminants, right?
Yeah.
So, where do you find you get the most contaminants when you do a bottom load? Because I know I still get some, right? Especially the top corner.
Yep.
On certain cars, when you bring the film in, you'll the top kind of rolls over sometimes a little bit. So you can basically just clean that top edge real nice.
Yeah.
That's probably one way to avoid some contaminants.
Doesn't really show in the video, but I always try to wipe the top edge, and then whenever I do my prep as well with the doodle bug, I'll wrap it around the top edge as well. Top edge is still the place where I get the most contamination. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts. That's usually the biggest complaint right there.
Yeah, and I think when you're new to window tinting too, people forget sometimes, there's a ton of dirt actually inside those gaskets on top.
Yep.
And it never gets cleaned, so it's you really do got to focus on cleaning that quite a bit.
Yep.
And so you use the orange to kind of just settle in place, then you use your blue max to squeegee and lock the film in place.
Yep.
Do you ever just go with the blue max right away?
I used to, just to get it done real quick, but I kind of find it nowadays that if you go beforehand with the orange crush or a pink squeegee, something a little bit softer, just to set the film down, you have less chances of the film shifting on you right away. It's just kind of muscle memory to me at this point. If I see a blue max, I kind of want to go hard with the blue max. Yeah. If you do that with the orange crush, you get away with it because the orange crush is softer. So even if you're going hard, you're never going to get the same kind of seal as the blue max.
And I think if you use a lot of slip too sometimes, you can still shift a little bit. If you go with the orange, and then you can kind of adjust your top edge, especially when we do kits that come out of a plotter. Sometimes that top edge is not as straight as if we free-handed it.
Yep.
So, yeah, I totally get why you like to do that there.
That's just me lifting up from the bottom because it was, I guess I didn't seal my edges too far down enough.
And you didn't shrink this one, right?
I did not, no.
Yeah.
So that was one of my biggest things learning was not every single window needs to be shrunk. It's a nice habit to get into. If you see fingers, you think it needs to get shrunk, shrink it. But just through years of experience, I kind of know which vehicle needs to get shrunk, which vehicles I can get away with no shrink.
And how do you read that? Just curvature of the glass, pretty much?
Pretty much.
Okay.
You see if the glass curves a lot. Even if some glasses don't look like they curve, they'll curve a lot too.
Yeah.
When you lay the film down on the outside before you go and install it, I always act like I'm going to shrink it. I'll do the same procedures, squeegee down, U-pattern, make sure I get all those fingers there. If I don't see much there, or if anything at all, I'm not going to bother shrink.
Do you ever get fingers that come back still, sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah, depending on the film I'm working with. But you can get away with shrinking on the inside. Okay. Yeah, especially with the door cards off. You don't have to worry about burning that door card anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you never really do the sides anyways, just because of the way how the grain of the film is. You want to pull it down, you should be okay.
I think one thing too is when you get that open gasket like that, even if there are fingers, you can kind of squeegee it all the way out, and then you use the adhesive that's on the tint to actually grab the glass. Versus when you two-step, sometimes I find that like if you didn't take that gasket off, you're kind of screwed in a way.
Yeah,
like you can shrink it, but you might
can't
pick up
get all the way down
or,
there. It's just.
All right, so now let's take a look at two-stepping. All right, so I mean the reason why I like two-step sometimes is with some door cards, like with BMW and stuff like that, I've busted clips taking door cards off. So there's certain cars you do lose a little bit of time, I think, in removing, but you also gain some of that time back in the installation. So really, they're kind of like 50-50 almost. In a way. Like you lose some time, but you kind of like either cut it off the front end or on the back end. Two-step, I think, for me works well, but it depends on which car too. Like some cars, definitely sometimes you don't even have an option. I think you do have to bottom load no matter what. So basically the difference here in the two-step versus the bottom load is I didn't take the door card off, and I'm just going to do it the way the card comes. Which, like I said earlier, sometimes works in your favor, and sometimes you find out that it actually ends up being a mistake, and then you got to do it all over again. So then when I do this one too, I take the liner off, but I only take it about 70% of the way off. But you're right. Like sometimes here, you can catch a little bit of contaminants on that door card.
Yep.
And then same thing with you too. Like I do like to use my softer squeegee just to line up my edge, just in case I gotta shift it a little bit. And two, like it depends on how aggressive the
adhesive is.
Yeah, because sometimes you can shift and sometimes you can't even shift, even when you use like the lightest pressure.
Yeah, it's also with like your slip solution as well.
Yeah, right. And I'm using a bottle here because you're using the keg too, which gives you a good amount of. You do get a lot more water. Well, let's say less water, but
more volume. Was it just more pressure? Yeah. It's more even spray.
The distribution is pretty nice. Same thing. I just used the Blue Max like you do.
Yeah, I noticed you pulled out the Conqueror this time around.
Yeah, and usually I don't even use this one too much. I usually just use the Easy Reach, the gold card that we both were using. But in this case, I kind of just wanted to be sure. So this is where like it gets tricky on a two-step, because on that far end near the A-pillar, this one's got actually a decent height. But sometimes, as you can see on that far corner over there, it almost came up all the way back to the top, which would have been a big mistake, because then I would have probably got way too many contaminants, had to do it again. And then when I do this two-step, I use a ton of water here because I actually got to roll that film back in there. And doing this too, how many times have you creased doing that?
A ton, especially with a thinner film
right
like
there,
this.
Yeah, that roll there can always create a crease too. I wipe my door panels pretty well, but that kind of depends on the car, because some cars have like that felty card, and you can catch line contaminants, versus this one's a hard plastic, so it's a little bit easier. But, I mean, we'll ultimately get to the same result, but.
Just two different methods.
And I think both ways, I mean, it's, as an installer, knowing both is.
Yeah,
key, right?
It's for sure. You definitely need to know both ways. Even when it like goes back to like using a plotter versus hand cutting, it's always nice to know both ways.
Yeah, there's always going to be a time, like let's say your plotter takes a crap or whatever, then you got to go back to freehand.
You don't want to reschedule those appointments, just get it done. It's also some cars aren't available on the plotter.
Yeah, exactly. And even when the pattern is on the plotter, sometimes it's not even that.
Yeah, it's not 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So I noticed you rolled it down a little bit to reseal that top edge.
Yeah, that far corner, because it pulled a little bit out.
Okay.
I knew there was still going to be a little bit of water back there, so I had to roll it back down a little bit. So the downside here is because on this door card, you got that deep pocket there where I'm going right there. So there is one downside where in that little pocket, I'm probably going to have a bit of moisture, like more moisture than if you take out the door card. And that's why I'm like addressing that corner a few more times to make sure it doesn't roll over. You also had your door covered.
Covered, yeah.
So versus me, I'm like always wiping it. And on certain cars, like like some of the fake leathers and stuff, they can swell and stuff like that. So
Yeah, a lot of the new BMWs, they will swell up like the instant you get water on them.
Yeah,
So I always try to cover it.
a lot of it does come down to experience too, like knowing which door cards you got, what kind of material, and it always changes every year too, which sucks. But that forces us to like constantly learn. Too.
Always learning.
All right, so yeah, that's basically it. We just want to show you guys 2 different ways of doing side windows. You can bottom load, you can 2-step. Both ways are, I'd say, pretty efficient depending on which one you're comfortable with.
Yeah. They both got ups and downs. You take off the door card, you got to know how to do it. You got to be safe. You don't want to be breaking door cards. But then if you 2-stage, you got to be careful about getting water everywhere. Like we were talking about the BMWs, you don't want those leather to swell up, replacing a door card. I'd rather replace clips than replace door cards.
Yeah, because I did a Mazda not too long ago where I actually pried it the wrong way, taking it off, and I actually cracked the door card. That was a $700 mistake. So that basically nullified that entire job. Actually, that cost 1.5 times that job because it was just 2 front windows. So there's going to be ways where, yeah, sometimes you want a 2-step, sometimes you want a bottom load. The nice thing, too, I find these days is you can pretty much YouTube almost anything.
Yeah.
And before you're going to take a door card off, you can just YouTube it.
Even all the new cars, there's just going to be like videos everywhere. You'd be surprised how little they change within door cards, how to, like, assembly-wise. If you go from, like, a 2014 Silverado to a 2022, it's literally the same for 7mm bolts.
Yeah, what's one of the harder door cards that you?
BMW is pretty tough.
Yeah,
I think they have a lot of hidden screws. Audis are pretty tough too, especially like the A6s. Even if you remove the door cards, those A6s have the gasket completely sealed all the way around. They don't just pop out. So you do either have to cut if that's cool with the customer, or you just end up doing a 2-stage anyways.
Yeah, so maybe European cars a little bit. Sometimes.
Yeah, Europeans for sure. Anything JDM or like. Anything from Asia, pretty much. You know, your Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, Honda, all of those are pretty much guaranteed to be like 3 or 4 Phillips head screws, and you're solid.
Yeah, and if you 2-step too, Japanese cars usually have pretty loose gaskets.
Yeah, everything's
so they're very easy. Yeah, like if you're used to doing, and everybody in your town is definitely driving a WRX. So if you're doing WRX with Subarus, those gaskets are like a breeze.
Yeah.
So 2-stepping those is really easy, but it just comes down to where you're going to get contamination and understanding how to not get those, which that kind of just takes, I think, practice and time.
It's time. It's time.
Just doing it over and over
Think
again.
about us. Like, we probably have how many years of experience combined together. We're still going to get contamination.
Yeah.
It's just, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's a guaranteed.
And if you get contamination, then you pretty much got to redo it. And I think through experience, the thing that we've learned too is that it's easy for us to redo one. Versus, I remember when we first started doing them, like redoing something more than twice, and your head's pretty much out.
Yeah, you're out of the loop.
So
you're not in the rhythm anymore. You just want to stop.
So yeah, you guys definitely got to be patient about that. But anyway, if you guys got any questions, want to know either about bottom loading or 2-stepping, let us know. If you got some tips too on how to do things better, faster, whether you cover your door cards or which tool you use, make sure you let us know, because I know that I'm always trying to learn. I know you're always trying to learn as
100%.
well. And so we're just trying to be better at what we do when it comes to window tinting. We definitely know what we're doing. We trust our jobs 100% of the time, but there's always something to be learned. I think that's the beauty of window tinting. So,
Yep.
All right, so if you guys get any questions, leave them in the comments below. Let us know. We're always trying to learn from you guys, and I hope you guys learned something watching this video as well.